Hi, I thought I'd talk through this one as there were so many elements that went into making this effect, and truthfully writing them down would have destroyed my soul. So this effect was inspired by a little music video by Method Design for Major Lazer. I'm sure every beginning Houdini learner has seen it, but I was drawn into a particular set of humanoids. Ones I like to call the yarn people. You see, in a time of uni deadlines, freelancing and having to grow up, they're free to dance, not a care in the world. Like California surfers, they represent true freedom. So I thought to create a series of strings connected to a moving character. It sounded like it could create some satisfying simulations. Strings bouncing, swaying and colliding while the motion busts out some moves. Ticked all the boxes. Luckily I found a tutorial from the folks at Antagma. Their wire solver was able to provide the general theory and setup that I needed to pull this off. I found myself a lovely character model, and as I'm no 3D animator, I used mix mode to get the motion. Nothing's ever easy with me. Till I figured out what was wrong with Rudy. Yep, Rudy the reindeer. Christmas was coming up. I used a basic mocap fella for my initial testing. Right, so now we reached the point where I was brave enough to step into Houdini. In my geo, I first threw down an agent node. I found out this has an FPX import and recognizes Mixamo. Perfect. I then followed the methods used by Antagma, as well as applying what was briefly touched on when experimenting how to create the Prometheus hologram effect. This included a scatter and connect adjacent pieces to establish my key points and wire design. A resample followed in order to generate the points between points, then numerous attributes which were created to provide the weight, velocity, and animation detail. Before I carry on, this eventually resulted in another misfire. After several attempts to fix it, a nap and a short cry later, I managed to find out the problem.
I left an S in my Vex code where there wasn't meant to be one.
With that sorted, look at them go. The wires are now sticking to the point and the wires droop. Yet, I really wanted to have my model collide with the wires as he moves, since I have low self-worth and deserve pain. I also had this completely unique idea to have the lights go off during the sequence and have Christmas lights turn on. It was completely original. Once little Rudy found his rhythm, I had to do one more thing: gather reference material. I felt the strings in the previous copy weren't bouncy enough. Originally, I was going to play with some yarn to get a feel for the motion, but that was dull. You know what's not dull? This is true freedom. Yeah. Now that I have Rudy and my references, I'll actually talk through the steps. So yeah, I began with sorting out Rudy, using an agent for my Mixamo FPX sequence, unpacking him for full control over his data, then converting him into a polygon, nulled him for other uses later. To avoid getting these weird scatter points within the model, I've split the features from the body, cutting them out and keeping the surface in one piece with a merge. Finally, giving it good old cache to save my computer melting. There was an idea to plump them up with an attribute wrangle, however I decided for a different version later down the line. I then normalized him, the little weirdo, then subdivided to smoothen the surface. There's a section I had over here for little wires, but they looked a bit naff. Anyway, we started off with a scatter set to in texture space. I found this kept everything to the model's surface. Remember that puff up attribute wrangle? Here it is. Figured it was best to have the wires slightly off the surface while generating everything. The time shift was an ingenious idea I cannot take credit for. This allowed us to move along the sequence, finding the best point to generate the wires from and bringing that to our connect adjacent pieces. This all goes into an attribute copy, creating a move to animation attribute, followed by a resampling to create the points within the wire to smoothen it once we've added motion, and now they stick. They're not looking very wiry, and it's going through Rudy. I used a series of groups and rays in order to get the wires within the model to pop out onto the surface, or get deleted entirely. Threw a bit of a lift on there too, just to help it puff out and the simulation run a bit smoother. I feared it jumping, but it did that anyway later. We'll get to that. In my DOP network, I have a basic setup. I have a wire object, a solver, gravity, hard connection, constraint network, and merging it all with a ground plane. And then I've got my static object, which is Rudy. I have Rudy in here because, as mentioned, I ideally want the wires to be bouncing off him. So as he moves, it hits him and then goes into crazy territory. At the time of recording this, it didn't go to plan. I'm still trying to figure out what the hell goes on at frame 13 because he just kind of explodes. Not really sure what that is. It's entertaining, to say the least, but not when you've been waiting till 2 in the morning. So out of the DOP network, I have my DOP import just to bring in the wires. I cached it all, again, just to make my computer very, very happy. As mentioned earlier, I wanted to have these little light bulbs, and the best way I could imagine putting them on there was to copy spheres to the points of the wires. So I did. I gave it a null to be able to take out later and then add a material which will emit the light. Back onto the main function, we then have a ramp, which there's a couple of features to then try smoothing it out and make sure that everything's looking as good as possibly can. I added a for each loop so that every single wire has a color already attached to it. And finally, once again, I cached it. For the bulbs, I used an object merge, importing them in, added some normals, and then finally just a material, which was the standard material light. I think I made it green just to give it that Christmassy feel. As mentioned, I wasn't able to actually get this working at the time of recording. Ideally, I wanted to have this done and dusted around the second week of December, but it just wasn't working. Things were popping, and then I kept changing my mind as to how I wanted it. But I tell you what, it did make a very good Christmas card. Thanks for watching.